So today we will have a more discussion on risk management, which will be in continuation of our previous discussion of risk management, what is risk, etc. So what is the meaning of risk? We have understood risk is the unanticipated situation. Okay, just now we have seen that exporter will have an unanticipated situation. Like if he's exporting on a particular day, an amount is to be received after a few months. There will be unanticipated situation. No? Always there will be an unanticipated situation. And with adverse financial losses or reduced earnings, such situation is known as risk. So risk will be unanticipated only. Okay. But there are techniques for measuring risk. But we cannot exactly predict risk. Okay. There are techniques for measuring risk, like standard deviation, okay, beta, coefficient of variation, etc. All these methods can measure risk. Okay. But risk is always unanticipated, and if it will have an adverse financial effects, okay, like losses or reduced earnings. So risk means what? Unanticipated. And if it is having an adverse financial losses or reduced earning, we will call that situation as a risk. So using methods, mathematical techniques, we can predict risk or measure risk. Okay. So what is risk? It is uncertainty or unpredictability of the future. So that is the risk. So always uncertainty and unpredictability will be there in future. Such unanticipated situation which is having an adverse financial effect, like losses, reduced earnings, it is called risk. Now, from point of view of finance, risk depends upon its management. This we have understood that risk can be managed. We can reduce the risk, but we cannot completely eliminate the risks. So risk can be reduced or mitigated, but it is not possible to eliminate or completely avoid the risk. Okay, because for earning some reward, it is necessary to take some risks also, because we know that there is a link between the risk and reward. So the risk may not be necessarily avoided by the organization. Okay, you cannot completely ignore risk. Any organization cannot completely ignore the risk. That's why we said that risk can be mitigated or reduced, but we cannot completely eliminate the risk. Okay, and it is not practically possible and not desirable also. Okay, so how much you should reduce risk or how much risk you can accept, that will depend upon your capacity. That is known as a risk taking capacity. Okay, different organization will have different capacity. Okay, so what is your risk management capacity? How much risk you are willing to take? That all will depend upon your risk management policy or risk management system. Okay, so this we cannot say that there is a standard rule that this much risk you should accept and this much risk you should try to avoid or reduce. It all depends upon organization to organization or person to person. Okay, like if some persons are risk averse, they will not go in share market. Okay, they will completely try to avoid the risk and make investment in the safe avenues. Okay, if some persons are risk willing, they will invest aggressively in the stock markets. So it all depends upon the person to person's aptitude towards risk. Okay, so we will have to understand the risk management policy or risk management system, and more importantly, risk taking capacity. What is the capacity of your organization to accept the risk. But in some or the other ways, every organization will try to take measures to mitigate or reduce the risk. Okay. Now, what are the features of foreign exchange market that we know, because of which risks may arise? That what are the features? Like exchange rate fluctuation. Okay, this is the first important thing in a foreign exchange market. Main is the exchange rate fluctuation. If your position is open, then you will be impacted by the exchange rate fluctuation. This we have very well understood with an example also. We know that foreign exchange market operates 24 hours a day. Okay. And there is no entry and exit barriers in this market. It is a multi-location, because foreign exchange market is a global market. No, it will exist in all the countries. So there will be market risk also. Okay. So these are all some of the features. Like main risk is the foreign exchange fluctuation because of the open positions. Okay, because settlement does not take place simultaneously. So in case of an exporter and importer, we have understood that after 3 months time, normally payment are received or paid. So there will always be an open position. Because of that, risk will be arise. And another thing is the government policies regarding the foreign exchange market. So in India, there is a strict control by RBI on the foreign exchange market. So government control will also affect the foreign exchange markets, etc. Okay, and another is the demand and supply. This we have already seen. This will cause an impact in the foreign exchange rate. Okay. Now, who all faces the risk in the foreign exchange market? It will be faced by the corporates, that is the business who are having the foreign transactions, and the banks. Okay, because we know that banks are the authorized dealers who can deal in foreign exchange. So corporates, that is a business houses, banks also face, individuals can also sometimes face, because if they want to purchase or sell foreign currency for some purpose, they are also exposed to the foreign exchange market. Okay, so any person who is having a dealing in foreign exchange market will be impacted by the foreign exchange risk, but mainly it will be the business and the banks. Okay. Clear this much, everybody? Okay. Now, what are the types of foreign exchange risk that we will understand in brief? Risks faced by corporates in foreign exchange market. One is the transaction risk. Transaction risk is nothing but the importers and exporters in international trade accept the contract based on the exchange rate at that time. Okay. However, there is a time gap between the period of acceptance of contract and fulfillment, and the exchange rate changes in this period adversely. This is our famous example, which we have discussed already, that exporter will export the goods, okay, on a particular date. So that invoice will be based on that rate. But when you will receive the payment, it will be after some months, few months, 3 months time, 6 months time. So in that time period, if the exchange rate changes adversely, it is a transaction risk. Okay, because here your transportation is exposed to the risk. Okay, so exporter will accept the contract based on the exchange rate at that time. We have seen if exporter is exporting the goods on 1st April, so invoice will be based on this base rate, but he will receive the payment in 30 July after 3 months. So, but settlement will be made on this date. So if there is an adverse movement by this date, it is known as transaction exposure. Okay, this is known as transaction risk. Similarly, importers will also be impacted by the transaction risk. Now, transaction risk is an indispensable part. It is an indispensable part because it is a part of a contract only. It is an indispensable part, but we can manage that using internal and external hedging. And most popular method for managing this risk is derivative contracts. Okay, so derivative is an external hedging technique. Hedging means protecting the value of something. If you are having some asset, you want to protect its value. That technique is known as hedging. Hedging is the technique for protecting the value of some asset, etc. It is known as hedging. So how you can protect your transaction risk? By entering into an external hedging, that is through a derivative contract. So what is a transaction risk? The adverse movement which will take place from the date of contract to the date of settlement or date of fulfillment of that contract. It is known as transaction risk. Okay, exporters and importers will be basically impacted by this transaction risk. And which method is used for managing the transaction risk? We can use the derivative contract, or we can use the leading and lagging technique. We have already discussed now. These are some of the techniques. Or you can enter into a money market operation also for managing your foreign exchange risk. See, risk management through hedging, this we have discussed. And very popular method for hedging is a derivative. Leading and lagging is an internal hedging technique. Okay, in leading and lagging, what is the method used? You can delay your receipt, or you can postpone your payment also, or you can prepone your receipt, or you can prepone your payments. So depending upon the expectation, how foreign exchange market will move, you can use the leading and lagging technique. So this is one of the technique which we can use for managing the risk. And another technique is the most popular is the derivatives. That is a derivative is an external hedging technique. And what are the types of derivatives we have seen? It is forward contracts, futures, options. Swaps is also there, which is an advanced form of derivatives. In swap, there will be exchange of cash flows. Okay, so you can exchange your cash flows from, you can convert a flexible interest into fixed interest, and fixed interest into a floating rate of interest, etc. So that is meaning of swaps. Swap means exchanging the cash flows. Okay, so forwards, futures, and options and swaps, these are the types of derivative instruments. So this all we have discussed already. What is a future contract? What is a forward contract, etc. What is options? How many types of options are there? Two types of options are there: call option and put option. Call option will give the buyer the right to purchase, and put option will give the buyer the right to sell. and call option seller or put option seller does not have the right. They are having the obligation. Only buyer of the option will have the right. Okay, this much everybody comfortable? Okay. See, what are the some of the types of risk? Let us see. One is the credit risk. Credit risk means a risk in which the borrower may default the repayment. Such type of risk is known as credit risk. So if a borrower is borrowing money, what is the chance that he may default in that payment? That risk is known as credit risk. Okay, we know that foreign exchange transaction exports or imports are in credit basis. So there is a chance of credit risk also. That opposite party may not make the payment only. So the risk that the borrower default in repayment. Okay, so this is a credit risk. What is a market risk? It is a risk which arises from the adverse movement in the market prices. So if there is any adverse movement in the market prices, such risk is known as market risk. So what is a credit risk? It is a risk that borrower may default in making the repayment. Suppose exporter exports the good, opposite party does not pay only. Okay, chances may be there. So such type is known as credit risk. It will also exist in the foreign exchange market. Market risk is always there. That adverse moment in the market price may be arising. So the two types of risk are credit risk and market risk. Then another important and popular risk is the exchange risk. This we have understood that if there is an open position because of which there is an adverse movement in the foreign exchange rate, it is known as exchange risk. Country risk. Country risk is depending upon the country. That is, the country risk arises when a foreign entity or a counterparty or a private or a sovereign may be unwillingly or unable to fulfill its obligation for reasons other than the usual reasons. Okay, so that's the country risk. What is a country risk? That we will see in detail later on. What is a country risk? Then interest rate risk is there, because we know that foreign exchange rates are impacted by the interest rate. So interest rate movement also cause an impact on the foreign exchange risk. Okay, because of adverse movement in the interest rate. So the interest rate will have an impact on your foreign exchange rate. So interest rate risk is also one type of an foreign exchange risk, you can say. Okay, So today we are stopping here. In the next class we will see about what is a country risk. Okay, what is a country risk analysis, etc., and some more type of risk we will see in the next class. So this much everybody comfortable whatever we have discussed. Okay, I will upload the textbook copy also in the Google Classroom.